we actually have probably the world's largest test bed of seeing how the technology works, how it scales.
And welcome everyone, and welcome to SlatorPod. Joining us today is Matt Hauser, Senior Vice President of TransPerfect, the world's largest language service provider, as we all know. So Matt's in charge of tech over at TransPerfect. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Florian. Excited to be on the show. You and Esther do some great work, so it's great to be on the podcast.
Thanks so much. So where in the world does this podcast find you today? New York, where HQ
I
is?
am in it. I'm in Atlanta, actually. So I'm based out of Atlanta. I've been here, for over 10 years. And it's nice to be doing this from the office, which has been more of a regular thing. So yeah, I'm in our Atlanta office today.
Sounds great. Good view there. I see for the people watching this on
Not
YouTube.
raining today. It's nice.
Not raining today. Well, it's raining here. So Matt, first tell us a bit about your background, your history with TransPerfect. That goes back to a couple of decades, 2.5 decades, I believe.
Yeah, it's a long time. I started with TransPerfect in 1996. Actually opened the Atlanta office here, and really was as kind of a straight business development person. As you know, the industry was quite different back then, so it was a lot of faxing and a lot of documents that were getting moved around in bankers' boxes for translation, and then stayed with the company, had to leave in 2004 to deal with some family issues, and then was fortunate enough that Phil offered me an opportunity to come back in 2007 with a focus on looking to build out our technology, our sales and marketing around that, and kind of work with our development teams to really go hard with Global Link and get that out in the world.
So TransPerfect now, it's come a long way, right? So you guys are $1 billion company, and you've been developing tech, as you just said, for a couple of decades. So for the listeners, just to understand the sheer scale of what you guys are doing, just give us a brief overview of kind of TransPerfect's tech ecosystem, really across kind of the whole range of TransPerfect group companies, right? It's quite a conglomerate that has been built over the years.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And I like the comment that you made there at the end. We are the world's largest language services provider, and we're very proud of that. We're very proud to be the first company to crack $1 billion in revenue. But we don't really see ourselves as this behemoth of an organization. We really see ourselves as a collection of smaller companies that are really focused on solving very specific client problems. And we view the technology side of what we do in a very similar way. We have sort of this incubator mentality that really creates a lot of entrepreneurial spirit around how we develop our products. We're working very closely with our clients to understand what their requirements are, and also with our production teams in terms of what they need from the technology. But really what that's allowed us to do is create what we think is a very unique ecosystem of products. Everyone I assume is somewhat familiar with Global Link. We have 6,000 plus clients worldwide that are using some flavor of our Global Link solution right now. But we also have a lot of other technologies that are part of that ecosystem. In the legal side of what we do, we have technologies like Digital Reef that help our clients in that area. I'm sure you're aware we did some mergers with some CCMS companies, with Astoria and Basant, to kind of move a little upstream and be able to help clients in that area. In our life sciences area, we've got a company called Trial Interactive that is an ETMF company, basically an end-to-end solution for companies that are interested in bringing drugs to market. We have our Data Force division, which is all around data collection and annotation. We have a media division called Media Next, which is focused on subtitling and voiceover work. And we even are developing really interesting technologies around how to schedule an interpreter and how to do that more efficiently. That's a product called Interact. So really what we're trying to do is we're trying to help our clients be understood, for sure, but also help them to understand the world around them in terms of all the different types of challenges that they may have in bringing their content into other languages and developing technologies to kind of support those efforts.
I mean, imagine that's a super complex challenge of like developing such a kind of disparate, complex technology stack, for lack of a better word. I mean, how do you go about this? Do you have like a centralized team that kind of collects feature requests, or like how does that work? Or is it really kind of out with the individual business groups in terms of kind of laying out their roadmaps?
That's a great question. So, building and running a technology company or a division, a technology division within another company, is definitely a challenge. And there's always that possibility where, what you want to do is you want to encourage innovation and you want to encourage entrepreneurial spirit so that people have the ability to kind of chase ideas, and look to see where we can add value. But you have to do that within a structure. If you don't have a structure around that, what happens is you create these different silos where you have technologies that don't communicate with each other, or it creates a disjointed experience for clients that may want to use multiple elements of the technologies that I talked about. And when we first were starting this initiative, really in 2007, when we really started investing heavily, in building out technologies, we learned that very quickly that you want to have freedom, freedom with some sort of controls on top of it to work within a framework, so you don't have all these different technologies that don't play nice together. And another thing that I think we've benefited from as an organization when it comes to developing these technologies is we are our own biggest customer. So
Hmm.
about 85% of all the linguistic production work that we do as an organization, which is significant as the largest language services provider in the world, runs through our technology. So we actually have probably the world's largest test bed, of seeing how the technology works, how it scales, what we can add to actually make the technology better, because we're using it day in and day out. It's a core part of our operations. And so, yeah, but like you said, you really need to have that balance of encouraging people to look at new ideas and new things, but also working within a system that these things are all can all complement each other and not just be a separate set of apps. So kind of more building towards a platform instead of just a series of tools, I think is probably the best way to look at it.
Got it. And I remember that Phil Shaw, the CEO, when he was at our conference in San Francisco, I think he used the like eat your own dog food metaphor when he
Yeah,
said like you're developing, but you're also a heavy user of it, of course. And I think the
absolutely.
approach is really to build and buy instead of license third party, right? There's other players out there that kind of have this best of breed and they license whenever there's a need. But I think TransPerfect's approach is really to either build the tech themselves or kind of own it outright and develop it. Like that's a conscious decision you guys have made like a long time ago, and they're really pursuing it.
It is, and I can't take credit for that. That's definitely something that is coming from Phil, and I think really where that comes from, the sort of thought process around it is we want to be in a position where we are 100% accountable to our clients. And if you're using third-party technologies, or if you're having to use other things to connect with systems, what you're doing is you're creating additional points of failure, number one. But also you're losing that accountability, and we like being in that position. It can be a risky proposition because you are the one neck to choke if something goes wrong. But it does allow us to be able to, if there are issues, and look, it's technology, it's services, there's always a challenge that's going to come up, but we want to be able to have the power to solve those things ourselves and solve them quickly. And we can also have a much tighter feedback loop in terms of when we want to develop something, when we want to add new features or functionality, we don't want to have to stand in line behind a bunch of other customers, that are maybe licensing the same technology. We want to be able to take what we think is important and put it into the application and get it live as quickly as possible. So, but we're also, excuse me, we're also very fortunate, not to try to keep praising Phil, but it we have a CEO that has been very, very technology focused for a very long time, and he's been willing to make a significant investment year over year. I think that's probably more important than making an investment, is a consistent investment in R&D, because he sees the value of what technology can do to our operations and to our clients. So I think, sure, saying that you're going to build things is great, but you really need that commitment at the top level of the organization to make that actually work, because it is labor intensive, and it, it is expensive.
Got it. Now, let's take a step back. I mean, you've been in this industry now for 25 years, and you've seen a lot of kind of tech trends come and maybe some go. Like, what were some of the major milestones for you, like from, late 90s up to now, where we're talking about NLP a lot and all these AI models, etc. But maybe just would like to get your view on some of the major milestones here.
Well, as a kind of a dinosaur in this industry that's been around a long time, like I have seen, the change was kind of slow in the beginning. If you're talking about what was happening, in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, we merged with eTranslate in 2002, and that was sort of the beginning of our move into translation management. And it was an industry that I don't think a lot of people outside of hardcore localization, uh, you know, gurus and people that have been doing localization for 25 years really even understood what translation management was. And it was sort of a slow uptick there. And then it really just exploded probably, 10 years ago, where all these things became very important. But, what we've seen, there's a few things. I think this move to the cloud, moving to online editors, if you think about the traditional cat tools, from back in the day, they were all desktop based. They sort of tethered the translator to a workstation. We kind of saw that early as that was going to be a very tough market for us to get into, because there were players that were really dominating in that desktop space. So we really decided out of the gate we were going to move to this online editing environment and kind of hitch our wagon to that. And with the benefits that go along with that. I think another big change that we've seen, certainly over the last several years, is this move to everything having an API.
Hmm.
As you're developing an application, and I think that kind of taking a page from Jeff Bezos's book at Amazon. I think he was one of the early CEOs that sort of mandated that everything had to have a REST API that was part of it. And not just at the product level, right? But for every feature within a specific product, you want to have an API for that, because it's going to give people more ability to customize and configure things based on how they're using these other systems, especially these headless systems that are coming out now in content management and e-commerce. And kind of tied into that, you mentioned before about how we made a conscious decision to really build our own technology, or go and merge with other companies that offered complementary technologies and bring them into the family of companies. Uh, in terms of us building integrations, and we've got 70 plus integrations into different systems that we built over the years. Even the process for that is different now. It used to be you get the SDK, from a content management system, and you sort of build to that and you sort of hard code it. And now all of that is driven through APIs as well. So now it's more, having a middleware piece, which we call Global Link Cloud Connect, that all these APIs can kind of talk to, and it creates a bridge to do that. So I think that's another one. And then, from a design perspective, at the beginning of this question, you said, what was it, or I mentioned what it was like in, 1999, 2000, these legacy translation management platforms. They were not user friendly, and they weren't
Yeah.
really built to be user friendly. They were built for someone that has been a translator or a loc manager for 20 years. And what we're seeing now and what we're placing a huge emphasis on at the global link development in all of our products, is really focusing on the customer experience. And what enterprise clients are expecting now is they want enterprise business applications to be as simple to operate as an app on their phone. So that to me is a huge shift. I think it's probably one of the reasons that our industry has experienced so much growth is because these game-changing technologies that make the localization process more efficient and more accessible are much easier to use. You don't need to, have graduated from the Monterey Institute, to be able to understand how to use, globally to submit a project. It's very intuitive.
Got it. I mean, these people juggle a lot of other projects, softwares, and projects at the same time. I mean, like even me, like I'm using like 30 SaaS solutions now for various different types of problems. So you just don't have the patience anymore to like become an expert in any of these.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
Let's talk a bit about integrating like machine translation into production. Let me put a thesis out, and I wonder if you agree or disagree. So I think we might be reaching a certain kind of maturity in terms of moving MT into actual production. So meaning like much of what can be done using post-editing MT is kind of now being done using post-editing MT. Like, how do you think about this? Do you think there's a lot of runway still left, or like we're starting to get a little bit mature?
No, I think you're spot on, Florian. And I don't have any hard data in front of me, but I would guess that 75% of all the translation work that that's happening on our side is going through some sort of PEMT process. What's the other 25%? I think right now it's kind of based on different variables. Like it's a transcreation project, which doesn't really lend itself to utilizing machine translation. It could be a source format that isn't parsable, a dead scan PDF or something like that. And there's still a lot of those out there. And then probably just other lower resource languages where the efficacy of the MT engines just isn't quite there yet, right? And
Yeah.
so, but I think we are going to the growth of MT obviously has been exponential, and the quality gains have been significant. So, in terms of where we see that process going, we're trying to really work through optimization. I think is probably the best way to describe the way that we're looking at MT, optimizing those post-edit workflows, really to just build better models, make the process more efficient. We want to have things like uh, better source content classification models, to identify things when it's coming in, to make sure that we're using the right engines to drive, the best quality of a deliverable. Having things like quality alerts and automating that so we can flag things where we're looking and seeing what the edit distance is. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? So obviously it's fully ingrained in most companies' production processes right now, and I think we're moving away from the adoption phase and now into the optimization phase because it's here.
Yeah, glad you agree. So it's been a long journey though. I mean, ever since we first started covering this kind of NMT to new thing back in 2016, and it took like 3 or 4 years for people to wrap their heads around. But I think now it's well in the kind of optimization phase.
It is
Um,
definitely here.
Let's talk about sales in tech, which a lot of smaller organizations in this industry struggle, right? So they wrap their heads around selling services, and now if they expand into tech, they basically have salespeople, and from the services side, having to sell technology. Like, what do you think is the key to selling translation, localization, technology, and how does it differ from selling services, which of course TransPerfect excels at, having hundreds of like salespeople, probably more than any other company in this space.
It's a great question, and I think maybe I have some decent insight on it because when I started, we talked about when I started at TransPerfect, there was no technology to sell. It was purely services, and I think, if you think about selling language services as a standalone piece, what are you competing on? You're competing on quality. You're competing on turnaround time. You might be competing on sort of domain expertise if it's within a certain vertical, but everybody's competing on those same things, right? No one's going to say, well, our quality is marginal and our turnaround time is mostly on time, and we're decent in the industry that you're in. So it does become a little more commoditized, and it becomes somewhat of a selling on price proposition. Not entirely, but that definitely plays into how people are looking at it. Technology is very different in that really what you're trying to convince someone to do with technology is to make an additional investment and trust that that additional investment is going to give them a return that is 5, 10, 50x on what they're putting out there. So it does become, especially for someone that's new to the industry or new to the process of launching a global website or a multilingual app or whatever the use case is, you are asking them to take a little bit of a leap of faith, right? Of look, you're going to invest here, but this is what it's going to mean for you. So I think that really kind of creates more of a solution based sell where you're going through these use cases with the client. You're not just giving them language translation samples, right? Or things like that that tend to move the needle on a straight services sale. You're kind of taking them on this journey and painting this picture of this is what it looks like now, and this is what it could look like. So it's a solution sale. It's a journey. It's a bit of an aspirational sale. But I think the main difference, and I've talked to our folks at TransPerfect about this because I spend a lot of time, trying to train the sales team on technology. It's also a longer sales process.
Yeah.
So you have to be patient. With services, it can be a little more transactional where someone says, "I need this done by Friday. How much is it going to cost?" It doesn't really work that way with technology, right? And you also have a lot of stakeholders that are involved. You have the business people, you have IT, you have system integrators. So it's a much more time consuming sale. But they're really two sides of the same thing, right? Services is the end result. Well, actually, it's towards the end result of what your customer wants. With they want to sell more pants in France, so they need the language in French. But technology is sort of what gets them to that end result and does it in the most efficient way. So it's really just about kind of changing the narrative a little bit to be able to tell that story.
You must have hired a lot of salespeople into this business. So what's the secret you're looking for? What's the key kind of characteristics of a person that you think is going to be successful in sales?
So I think they have to be, to be successful at TransPerfect. I mean, I can speak to that.
Yeah.
We are very much a meritocracy, and hard work is rewarded, but nothing is really given to you. And so I think you have to be willing to operate within that environment, knowing that you're going to have to invest time, you're going to have to invest effort. We're here to help you and coach you, and we feel like we have processes that are successful, and kind of stick with that plan, and good things will happen. So I think you have to be willing to put it out there and kind of make a bet on yourself. I think is what most successful salespeople, at least in our organization, that's one of the key traits that they have there. I think also the willingness to be competitive, but not cutthroat competitive. And what I mean by that is, I've been here a long time. Most of our senior management team has been here, over 10 or 15 years. We had a lot of opportunities when we started with this organization. And as you get bigger, when you get to the scale that we are, it's really incumbent on us as managers to make sure that the people that we're hiring today or the people that we hired a year ago still have the same opportunities that we had when the company was a $15 million company or a $20 million company. And I think, Phil has established really an amazing culture within the organization where, yes, we're all competitive. We all want to see where our numbers are on the board at the end of every day. We actually can do that. You can see exactly what everybody did at the end of every day. And everybody wants to be at the top of the board, but not by stepping on the person that's in the second spot, right? And we want to be able to elevate everyone and bring them along and make sure that they have those same opportunities. So, I think we have a pretty unique sales culture here at TransPerfect.
Indeed. So next to sales, one of the bigger challenges in the language industry is integrating when after an M&A, after an acquisition, right? So a lot of companies historically have struggled with integrating maybe not so much the people and the services side, but definitely the technology. So they just leave it there for a long time. I mean, what has been your experience now that TransPerfect has also done some M&A, right? With Semantix, with some of the media localization companies you acquired.
Hmm.
Yeah, what has been your experience?
Well, you say M&A. I think this is going to
It's
sound kind
more,
of goofy, but at TransPerfect, it's more M. We don't really look at it as an acquisition. We look at it as a merger. And really, the criteria that we're looking at, when we're looking to bring a company into TransPerfect, we want to look at talent. We want to look at the strength of the management team. We certainly want to look at the quality of their business, but we want to bring in like-minded entrepreneurial managers that want to be part of what we have to offer as an organization. You mentioned Semantix, the biggest merger that we've done to date. A very successful company that had been doing things a certain way for a very long time. They had built a lot of their own technologies to run their production processes, which were obviously working very well for them. So with Semantix, we're being very cautious with that. We obviously want to have a process where eventually they are working on our tools because there are advantages to them and to the organization and to their clients for that. But it's not something that we want to force, right? We don't want to create any sort of disruption and risk losing the goodwill that they have with their existing clients, just by forcing a change for change's sake. So I think it's been an adventure for us just because it is the largest acquisition that we've done by a lot. So there are a lot of moving parts there, but I think you have to take that approach of what is best for the business in the long term, not this is a mandate that we have to get done, right? You have to be reasonable about it and see, because there's unintended consequences to everything. And as much as we think what we have from a technology perspective running our production divisions is the best in the world, that doesn't mean that we just flip a switch and all of a sudden everyone is on it at a certain date. We have to make it gradual. Everyone needs to understand it, and it needs to, more importantly, ensure that continuity of a good client experience to be successful.
one major change or challenge I'd imagine was when you went into the dubbing space, right? So you started buying companies that have studios. How much of a kind of how different is that? Like a dubbing studio, dubbing media production setup from a tech point of view.
So I can't speak as knowledgeably about that, but I know that what we've been trying to do is create some consistent processes. So obviously equipment is different and those sorts of things, but what we want to be able to do, whether it's language production or dubbing or anything that we have, is have a framework so that there can be a consistent experience across these different elements of our company, where these studios can all effectively compete with each other within the TransPerfect family of companies. As salespeople win more deals, they're going to pick the studios where they want to have things done. So we want to have some consistency process there. And again, it's if you are all of a sudden every day, you've been working in Microsoft Word your whole life, and tomorrow your boss comes in and says, guess what? We're moving to Google and everyone's using Google Docs. Um, that takes time. Like, you're not going to be as effective by making that switch overnight versus if you're slowly introducing a change like that over time to say, we're working towards this. And when we feel that we can make a transition smoothly, that's when we're going to do it, not when, someone at headquarters says it needs to happen.
Got it. Let's look into the future a little bit. What's in your kind of tech roadmap initiatives for specifically Global Link in like this year, next year? Anything exciting coming up you can share?
Well, I'm going to put in a shameless plug here, Florian. We
Please
don't
do.
really share roadmap stuff publicly, but we do have our Global Link Next conference that's going to be taking place. We're going to have one in the U.S. in San Francisco and one in Amsterdam in September and October, respectively. So we can get a little more in details there. And if you want to go, let me know. I know a guy. I can probably get you in.
There you
Uh,
go.
but at a high level, that we do have a major release coming out for our translation and review environment, TransStudio Cloud, which will be coming out before the end of the year. And really what we've done is sort of rebuild that infrastructure around the technology with a lot of the latest technologies that are out there to optimize the experience, make it more efficient, faster, and really improve that experience for the translators. And another thing that we talked about this earlier is really just continuously investing in improving our UX and our UI for our clients. We've got a ton of clients that are utilizing our applications right now. We like to get their feedback, not just at events like Global Link Next that we do. Thankfully, this will be we'll be back in person this year.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years since we've done it in person, so I'm very excited about that. But over the course of normal business, like we're doing regular QBRs and getting feedback and putting those things into the product. So our major releases that we do are sort of the product of a bunch of iterative things that have been happening over the course of the year based on feedback from our production teams and our clients. So, but those are sort of two things. I'm not trying to be cagey, but we just normally don't release a lot of roadmap stuff.
I got it. I can go to Amsterdam. I might take you up on the offer. So
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
awesome. Well, Matt, that was fantastic. Thanks so much for taking the time to join the pod today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Florian. It's a pleasure to participate.